Welcome to Draw Process, where I draw entire pages of comics for my entire book. I'm on episode 2, page 47 of my comic First Sun and Sword, and I'll share my thoughts for the week and talk about the techniques and approach to how I'm completing these pages. Here we go. On this page, we are going to see what I was trying to work out is there's a page turn at the end of this page. It's an odd numbered page. And I wanted us to see Kurok show up at the spot that our characters were just at, and then him leaving to chase them. I wanted to accomplish that in one page. I know that needs to happen. It's in my loose script that needs to happen. But what happens was up for debate. It was open. I decided in the last page, we saw one of the soldiers still in a seated position with his broken arm, just holding it. It was just completely destroyed. So he wasn't a danger to them. They just ignored him, basically. But he kind of stood out like a sore thumb in the page, because it's like, here's this one guy sitting here still. So I thought I should use that. Here's the guy sitting here. 3 panels across the top, we see him sitting there, a shadow looming over him, and then him looking over his shoulder and seeing Kurok the Man-Eater, this lizard man. That's what we see here on this next tier. It's going to be 3 panels at the top, 3 panels at the bottom, with this wide open panel with its full bleed, but in a way it's almost borderless. It's almost like without a background here. So I needed an up angle on the lizard man, but not too much up of an angle. I want you to be able to see him more clearly, like see his eye looking down at him. And then buildings from either side of the street forming a V, drawing your eye in and down. And then here, what we have is these 3 panels here. The soldier is looking up while he's in shadow, and at the top of that panel is the lizard man's head. So the camera's just up, looking over, down, looking down. It's just above Kurok's head, so we have a very large head shape there, framing the word balloon beneath that, and then the figure kneeling at the bottom. And then I was trying to work out in what fashion Kurok was going to crush this guy. And at first I thought maybe he would use his forearm and kind of pounce down like you might see a bulldog do. But I decided he would stomp with his leg instead. And this man's sitting cross-legged and gets crushed down flat against the ground and spits up blood. I don't like to be super gory, but I liked the effect. Red really stands out on a page. It's going to make it clear the injury to this man. And with the pressure on his back from this leg, it also is kind of gross to think that it was squeezed out of him. And yeah, not to be too gory, but he could have just spit up his lunch instead. But that doesn't look good in color. In the colors, the red is going to pop. So I went with that. And then we see Kurok running away, basically towards the camera, towards the bottom right corner of the page. And now you'll see here, I'm working out the backgrounds. I'm still in that soft pencil. So I had my very rough, thumbnails, you could call them, or rough layouts. I had them roughly applied with just the figure positions. And then I'm throwing in the background. And working, finding my borders. I am referencing old pages to see what the buildings look like there. Not to be making them up too much. Keep them a little consistent. And now I'm using the heavier pencil, and you're able to see it better. So I mentioned it last time, but I'm thinking that if I can get where I skip this extra penciling step, then it saves a lot of time because I'm doubling over things. I do it in the light pencils, I do it in the heavier pencils now, and then I do it in inks. At the same time, if I just keep the light pencils very loose and then keep the next layer here loose too, with less details, less finished, then I'm not doubling. I'm just changing pencils. So I'm aware that I might do that. I might just simply put a little less information on these lighter levels and then a little less with the heavier. You'll see here I'm erasing a lot. Now, I don't know the solution there, because if I went straight to inks, I couldn't do that. I'd be stuck with whatever I had. And so if I'm not sure about the underdrawing, the rough layout is not too good, then, I might end up inking on top of that and not being happy with it. So these are the problems I have to think through when I think about trying to speed up. Something I did on this page to speed up is I've realized that I was scraping that G pen on the page enough that I had added enough blacks, filled in enough black to not need to go over it with a brush pen. That saves an entire step when I don't use the brush pen. To do that, I'm going to have to apply more black. But it feels very natural because I've already got the nib out, the G pen. I'm already using it. It's not hard to just like scribble in some extra black and look at the picture and make sure it's pretty balanced. And if I do that, it's a little bit rougher. There won't be any solid blacks. You'll see through them in spots. And that's a stylistic choice though. It's not a bad thing. For one, it lets the color come through. So if someone's in shadow, and I leave, if there's little spots you can see through the blacks, through the hatching of it, the cross hatching or something, then the color can come through, and which will help define what it is that you're looking at. It can look good. And here's an example of, I don't think those pencils were necessary. The pencils on the background, that could have been done in inks and saved me a few minutes. I'm also referencing prior pages for what this guy looked like. That's why this pause is happening right now in the video, is I'm pulling up the old pages to double check what his face looked like. There were several guys. They all looked a little different. In the first panel, we see the entire figure. In the next one, he's cropped a little bit into the shot. He's a little bit closer to the camera, and in the next one, even closer, cropped even more. There's if you keep your figure large on the page, large enough that on the panel, large enough that they're cropped in every panel, it can feel like they're not in an environment. You won't get a sense of space and so on. It's also a sign that they're taking up a large portion of the page, which can also feel a little unnerving. There's something natural about seeing a figure and them only taking up maybe think of it like a 70-30 or 80-20 golden ratio kind of thing. The figure in a photo often will only take up, or in a movie, or when we look at someone, they're not completely filling the frame unless you want to get really subjective in your view. Unless you're saying something with that, they don't fill the frame completely. So I find in comics a lot of times people will go with quite close up. That allows them to get more details. It might allow them to maintain, let's say a character's moving through a space, lots of action. you can sort of keep them the same size, panel by panel, which makes it easier to track because they're the same size. You just look for, where's Waldo? He's clearly the same size, kind of in the same, maybe even in the same spot, as in terms of like the coordinates in that panel, with everything happening around them. That can give clarity, but it can also mean that it's boring. Your subject never changes panel by panel, so that can be boring. It can be a little too subjective. You're not giving the reader a sense of the space that the characters are in. So I'm playing with that on this page. All of these panels are pretty close up. In this one, it's still you're not seeing all of Kurok in this panel. Only in the last panel do you really basically see all of him. And but the way I've got him cropped is you see most of him. You see his feet on the ground. You see his shoulders. You see most of him. And that was the choice. That was the choice to bring the camera closer. It's also a little bit more inductive, a little more subjective. It's a little more like this is a little horrific, but this is a little bit more like you might expect in a horror movie, a horror story, where the camera's kind of close. You can't see everything that's happening yet, just slight reveals of the horror instead of just displaying it all objectively, which isn't very scary, right? And also, here's another example where I'm working out the details of this figure of Kurok, and I probably didn't have to. I could have done that in the inks. And same with the guy that he's squashing, even though some poses are more complicated than others and might justify that extra work. But in this case, I could have pulled it off in inks probably. But again, you can basically see his full figure, and there's variety from panel to panel on the size of the figures, and I make sure to put them in the physical space. Even the middle panel, the middle tier, that's full bleed, you just see Kurok standing there, but you see the buildings on either side of him that are used as framing elements. They kind of guide the eye. They're part of the composition, the design of the page, but they're also putting him in physical space. He's not just floating in a void. I definitely was thinking this Kurok character is so big and muscular and strong. How on earth will a sick sword and a Farah and son, how will they be able to fight him at all? And we'll see how I manage to convey that. And it's not just in terms of story. How do you write a story where it's believable that they could fight him? But how do you draw it? How do you convey it? What the fight would look like if one punch from him kills somebody, then how do you draw interaction, conflict between him and them? For one, maybe it's more chase based, environment based, like where they're trying to use the environment to evade him or other characters. So. Yeah, and just drawing skill, because the way I like to draw action is so physical, kind of really showing what the movements are of the characters. That makes it challenging too, because how do you convey something so, I don't know, dangerous, I guess. That last panel has a lot of distortion on the perspective. It's almost like it's in a wide-angle lens, where the closer it's getting to the bottom of the panel, or you could say to the camera, the more distorted it's getting. It's sort of being brought closer more zoomed in or something. But it reads. We can tell that this is the ground that he's running on and that the people are smaller behind him. He's bigger in the front. It'll read. I did have a problem, though, when I first penciled it here. I was thinking it would be a full bleed panel. I didn't have the panel borders drawn yet. I thought, I'll just let this go to the edges. But I realized that throws off the composition of the entire page as a whole. I did not want to redraw him. So I moved his arm down and under his head, that's challenging too, because now that his head's overlapping with his arm, I have to make sure there's no tangents and confusion there. But I had brought his arm under his head, brought his shoulder down and in so that it's not sticking out past the panel border as best as I could do it without redrawing it. But it worked. And I'm already jumping into the inks. Definitely getting more of a consistent line quality and hatching quality in some areas, like in the backgrounds here. This felt like I noticed when I was drawing it, this feels like it's got a consistency to it, to the style, the angle of the hatching lines, the weight of them, gaps between them. At the same time, I also knew that when I drew this soldier, when I inked this soldier, that the way I was trying to deal with the shadow situation was getting very messy. So the situation here is the sun is behind him. So the shadow is going to be on the left side, on the front and left of him. But, or the part of him that's in secondary lighting, that's, in shadow. But in the second panel, the shadow of Kurok is blocking out the sun. So he notices that he's suddenly in shadow. Now, how do I convey that? With my style, the style I've been using here, I'm not just going to completely silhouette him in black. But, how do I show that there's a solid shadow on him and yet he's lit from the other side by atmospheric lighting and so on? At this particular camera angle too. It's a little challenging at this angle because the angle at which the light would be hitting is more, he might only have like a rim light on him. It's a little tricky. A shadow on top of someone than under them, for example. So trying to work that out and make sure that I still convey his structure and form. I definitely just kept adding and adding with kind of these messy lines. And you'll see that here as I'm doing it here. So as I go, I find my basic outline, my basic roadmap, the kind of points like the back of the skull, the ear, these points, that roadmap points. And you'll see that here, the shoulders, and traps and everything. And then I'm slowly adding more shadow, and I'm applying it to the face of things. Instead of down like in the crevice, between muscle and so on. It's more on the surface of it because that's where his shadow's being cast. That's how I chose to deal with that situation. Still figuring that out because, in the past I would have approached this differently and probably worked it out in the pencils first instead of constructing it in the moment. That's more challenging. But I actually am content with how it looked in the end. I'm going to probably keep moving in this messy direction. This is how I'm making sense of myself to myself, which is worth doing. As you become your practice, you should work on that. But to organize yourself. But I'm probably going to keep moving in that messy inking direction because I'm presented with problems that I have to solve in the moment. They're going to be of great variety as I'm dealing with characters that I'm imagining, that I'm understanding as actually in a physical environment. Then then environmental conditions will arise, because I'm not just drawing based on, one way of doing things that I know how to do. I'm imagining a real environment with real environment conditions, lighting, it could be rain, fog, liquids, different reflective surfaces. I just have to deal with whatever comes up in the moment with the inks, and I need to let myself expressively convey those things, and then over time I will get better and better at doing so, and a consistent way of doing it may emerge. But I can't force the consistent way without learning how to do that, learning my way of doing it, because that will shut down your development when you insist on a method for doing something that you learned a long time ago, and you just apply that here. Then you're not engaging with the material anymore in a way that can lead to growth. So I continue down that path, and that feels good, and it's engaging. It's not boring at all. It's fun. And that's part of this too. Why am I trying to be faster? Well, I want to tell stories quickly, but I don't want to be bored. I want to be engaged, not just tracing over something I already did once. It's got to be interesting and engaging to me. Okay, well, several weeks out from that Memphis Con, but I'm still it feels like trying to hold on to something. I'm trying to hold on to how good it felt, and just how things fell into place when I was really enjoying several days of just connection with other artists, talking about our struggles and our approaches with our art, and several days of that's all I'm thinking about. And things became so clear. How should I be navigating social media and the Discord community that I'm a part of? And how should I be engaging with people in those spaces? And sort of just the motivation, the inspiration that new things are possible, that feeling that growth and new things are possible, and it's not boring at all. That I need to hold on to, and I need to find that with people. So I made a point to reach out to people this past week, and have meaningful, conversations wherever I can. Just really show up for people, with people. And I'm still figuring that out. I've always been kind of aversive to being public in general, but especially being public in a social media world, public like a public figure. Here I am doing this, series where I'm pretty open and honest, but this isn't outside my norm. This is because the way I do these videos, I feel like I can just be myself. That's not my normal. And it seems more and more I just need to be more and more open and clear, pointed about what's important to me. Like just in every facet of my life, I'm trying to let's get more honest, more dealing with reality and less with my shit, and presenting myself to others and to reality in a way that's exposing and vulnerable, but it leads to growth because you learn about your flaws when you show up. You won't if you keep hiding. So, oriented towards action, as I've said that too before. And here we go. The way that I'm executing the drawing of this lizard man figure here, I really liked. It's very organic, rounded, very alive. good structure. I know it's not perfectly accurate anatomy and stuff, but it's pretty good. And it's very alive and organic. And it's more so than in the prior pages I did months ago, where I had to draw him for the first time. It was stiffer because, there's always the issue of, I don't know how big is he, how wide is he, how long are his, forearms versus upper arms. His proportions are different than a normal human. So there's struggles with it. And then the more organic I get, the more detailed in this way that I draw him, the more I'm worried that I won't draw him the same way every time, because you're constructing him anew every time. But I get past, I'm letting go, I'm letting loose, and just drawing him the way I would imagine, and hopefully there's some consistency. I'll run the risk because it looks way more alive when I do it this way. And that's more the direction I want to go with my comic. Just like the way the perspective is warping, it's distorting on this last panel, I'm also wanting my figures as they are, moving towards the camera, like in perspective, foreshortening, you could say. Just the way they're moving, I want to embrace more warping. This warping is helped, again, by things I've said before, the perspective of things in relation to each other rather than in relation to a grid. The more that I just start drawing and I connect a shoulder to a bicep and so on, the more I just kind of build the things out, then they're just in relation to each other and it's less rigid. They don't have to be just right, but they connect. They feel right. Yeah, I've been inspired lately just by all the people I've met that have been creating and just how hard it is to create, to stay a course of creating consistently too. We may bust out one comic, but then to continue after that and keep going year after year, month after month, it is very, very difficult to do. And there's not much encouragement or support. People don't know how to support and show appreciation. Especially if you're not just amazingly talented that it blows them away, then they're not sure how to show support, especially if they don't have money to spend on your Kickstarter or something, which is all too common these days. So yeah, hard to get the support you need and just so hard to maintain and go down that path of becoming the practice of your art, developing a practice. So much is stacked against us. Life will try to require everything of you and have you let every boundary get crossed. How on earth will you maintain one practice for years? It is not easy to do. And now I'm erasing the page. Erasing the pencils out of it. This is Strathmore 300 paper. I find it's good enough, a good price point. But using the G pen and the Speedball black ink, it grips the page really well. The eraser does not lift it. Probably not the case when it comes to water. If I were to use ink wash or get the page wet, I think it might be even more prone to smudging than some other inks. But I'm not sure on that, but I know that the eraser will not lift it too much. So I can very comfortably erase every pencil after it's done. Now you see me with this opaque white paint. It's basically like whiteout in a brush pen that I'm applying in a few spots to just clean a few things up. In the top left panel, I actually shrunk his head. I realized his head was too large. He had the proportions of someone that might be 5 foot tall, but I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is a really tall, lanky guy. shrunk his head down some, using the whiteout and just redrawing it. And then I'm coming in with a micron because I do not want to get my nib back out and bother with cleaning it and stuff. So just a few lines I had to make with that to finish things up. And there it is. Again, I felt there was enough weight in like areas that are heavy enough black that I don't need to come in with a brush pen and thicken them and fully fill them in. And I let it remain in that kind of, see-through stage where you can see some of the color coming through those gaps. And I thought, let's continue to go this direction. It's a little bit faster. It opens it up a little more. I liked it. And that's the finished page 47. And just closer every day. I can't wait to get this book finished and start a new story and just kind of like really, really stretch into something different. Still with Sun and Sword for sure. But it'll be a different world, a different town they're in, and so on. I'm at least 20 pages out. I haven't really counted. And that's it. Be the practice of your art. Find others that are interested in doing the same and encourage them to do it. It feels good. It's really nice. Hang in there. See you next week.